the reasons why people aren't deploying robots, even though there's a bunch of good reasons to do it, is that it's hard, it's disruptive, it's expensive, and if you think about small to mid-sized businesses, which make up the lion's share of the economy, you know, if you're Ford or somebody else who has a highly choreographed assembly line, maybe you can take a rigid, inflexible automation system, set it up once, and it's good for a couple of years, even though with the high mix economy, that's less true even for them. Yeah, the cost of deploying them and configuring them and reconfiguring them is a huge inhibitor. In the case of mobile robots in particular, you often need experts to go with the robots because the robots aren't good enough to be able to work in real world conditions. And if you think it's hard to find somebody to push a cart for you, try finding a roboticist to go with your fancy new robot that ought to be able to do it on its own. So the expensive expert to try to offset the low-cost worker, I mean, that's obviously not an effective trade-off. And then, of course, people don't really like change, especially if they're not included in it, or they don't understand it. So that's sort of basic human nature thing. The last point about why do workers resist? Well, some of that's obvious, some of it's not. So nobody likes being put in front of a complicated machine that they don't understand, especially if that machine looks like it was put there to do your job. People don't like having something come in from left field and be dropped in their lap, or dropped next to them. It's better to be involved and invited and asked. And that dynamic is a huge part, I think, of what we see in terms of resistance. I imagine all of us have been in this situation at some point in our life where the expensive expert who's coming in to supposedly save money for your company doesn't have a clue how the company works. They don't know the people, they don't know the process, they don't know the products, they don't know the building. All of this stuff is critical to setting up a mobile robot. And when you see an expert come in and they don't know the things you know, and you're not being credited with the same capability, the same value, because they didn't even ask you. You know, they just brought somebody in who doesn't have a clue. That's infuriating. So it's easy to understand why people would resist that. And then obviously job security is always present when you're talking about robotics and automation. But there's also a truth that what I said earlier about robotics and automation sort of helping at almost every level, it really does. It does make more jobs, it makes more opportunity, except the workers that are doing low-skilled tasks really are more at risk of being displaced by robotics and automation than anybody else. And so you've got this part of the population who arguably is struggling the most. And they're going to be the most resistant to this thing coming in, and they're not wrong. You know, that is the thing that's most likely to disrupt their lives. And so it's easy for them to express their resistance in ways that are really difficult for a roboticist or a robot to understand. You know, when we deploy a robot and it's working great and we leave and we hear it stopped in the middle of a factory somewhere, we don't always know that that's because somebody's pushing a trash can in front of it every time it drives by. And so that's the kind of thing where if you can bring them in, if you can work with them to deploy the solution, it helps all of that stuff. So